I really appreciate you and Renee forcing this discussion. I appreciate the ability to talk about this stuff, even though I'm just one of many that are here that do the same thing, and I'm glad to be a part of this group. And anyway, so I'll just get started with it and see how it goes. Hopefully you see the full screen of very important buildings in San Diego's history. Why even talk about innovation in San Diego? Well, because we have a history of it. We have the Cliff May and the Ranch House. We have the Salk Institute. We have Bertram Goodhue's California Tower. We have a history of also financing sprawl. The FHA unveiled their home insurance, the lending insurance program to help middle-class people build own housing, because ownership was such at low points throughout history that the program was unveiled in San Diego, and we invented sprawl, and that's okay because we also invented the first contemporary built after the streetcars were taken away and city light rail system. Thank you, Mike Stettner, for being a part of that in the early 80s, late 70s. We brought back rail. Now we've opened up one line really since, but we've got rail, we've got the bones for it. We should be very proud of that. We also have one of the first vertical mixed-use buildings in the United States. If you all are older than, I don't know, I'm not going to say, but we used to talk about the Uptown District every 5 minutes, or whenever any APA person from out of town would show up, we drove them to the Uptown District. Thank you again, Mike Stettner, for making my grandmother angry about losing her JCPenney's parking lot on 13 acres. But
it's Sears. It was Sears.
It was Sears. It was a Sears. Thank you. Yep. I do embellish, and so because she was a Montgomery Awards person, but the rents at the Uptown District are still some of the highest rents for commercial office on the upper floors and retail on the ground floor in San Diego to this day. When this was a very controversial project at the time, but it spawned 1,000 mixed use walkable urban people out of San Diego and beyond. We also invented climate change. We understood the Keeley curve and the ability for Scripps and UCSD to help us study climate change and what that meant. Roger Revell's measurements it changed the world. So San Diego is a wonderful, wonderful place to study or to propose innovative ideas for, because we've done it before and we can do it again. Just a bit of context. I'm not talking about the ideas I have. The few ideas I'm going to share and talk too much about are really only focused on the downtown next to the waterfront from the 1880s on, leading into the streetcar neighborhoods of the Southeast San Diego to the North Parks. But I'm not talking about retrofitting suburban sprawl. I'm not talking about retrofitting most of San Diego. I'm talking about retrofitting urban San Diego. And you can see it in this image here where the downtown, the historic downtown, and then the streetcar suburbs surrounding Balboa Park. And I don't mess with the rest of the stuff out on the edge past Mission Valley, just because it's a different pattern, it has different rules, it has different techniques, it needs a different approach and different innovations, which we really haven't started doing yet, but that's coming because we're still in our 10 years of mixed-use walkable urbanism era. So I want to talk first about specifically is downtown and vertical placemaking. The idea that we are in a new era, that we are not built out, especially downtown, and that over 100 years we've actually, along with the rest of the world, have built a new context where what's encircled is the Santa Fe Depot on the top, which was one of the bigger buildings in downtown 100 years ago, to today where it's obviously one of the smallest buildings. There's a new vertical context that we never had to in the history of mankind deal with before steel, glass, industrialization. And you can see it here again in the ballpark village. We were doing it, we've been doing it, but we've been using the same 1890s technique, H.H. Richardson and Louis Sullivan idea of how do we deal with this new technology, this new building technology. We just used the old column when we had a cap in the middle and a base and we copied the classical idea of a column, and then we've created all kinds of different ways of doing the dumb column. The sculpture, the mechanical, the repetition, the perversion. I like that joke. And what it truly is vertical sprawl. It's a cul-de-sac in the sky. It's no different than the giant warehouse building or the endless subdivision or the vertical subdivision straight up, because it's just one size fits all. It's a congestion maker. And so the idea that you all know I am the new urbanist here declarative new urbanist in San Diego, and I use the transect, which is based upon, thanks again, Mike Stepner, for bringing Peter Calthorpe to San Diego in '89 to look at the transit-oriented development guidelines, because we had transit in '81, and we are able to do this pedestrian shed that able to show us place types, and we have different places. The beach is different from the woodland, which is different from the mountain, and they're all interconnected, but each one has its own habitat that's complete. Same goes with the human habitat. And what I'm saying is, now that we've had 100 years, a century of this new building, vertical city building, we can now look at connecting habitats vertically as well. Human habitats, looking at the base, the middle, and the top differently, rather than suburban sprawl, but a series of place types. And my inspiration comes from places called, not my inspiration, the latest trends are fitting into this idea as well. The High Line is the old trend that we all talked about, but what the everybody talks about, the reuse of the facility, but what the High Line actually does, it actually brings a civic public realm to the upper floors and connects them through a streetscape and system that's above the street. Now it's probably still a little too close to the street, but in New York it can be filled up. But when you got to think about in terms of stretching that out vertically as you move into less urban areas, spaces as places. The COVID has helped us see streets as a completely different facility than they were before. Streets used to be mostly for cars, maybe a bike lane and a parklet. Well, now they're for shopping and commerce and everything. And the idea of the 15-minute city has taken over San Diego, and the community plan updates are all 15-minute city studies, because out of Paris, it's very trendy. I didn't show, when I showed that picture of San Diego earlier, the whole aerial, the aerial of San Diego, I actually like to go through that picture and show all the planning trends. We Central Business District, downtown ballparks, Vancouver Towers. We've followed every of giant central parks. We've followed every planning trend every decade by the decade, and we're still doing it today. The Barcelona SuperBlock is also another block that another trend that's going on that's very important for San Diego as well, which is saying not all the streets are one way, 60-foot, 80-foot wide right-of-ways that blow through downtown, just regardless of context. You have different streets that perform different functions, that go from more mobility, complete streets, to less mobility, a pedestrian street or just a car street. And I try to apply that to downtown. So this is just a typical block in downtown, where the current situation is mostly high-speed one-way streets, and saying, no, we should have some green streets, some transit streets, some complete streets. And that allows us to be able to look at the blocks a little differently. That allows us to have higher intensity corners and lower intensity middles and higher intensities around new park spaces, and come up with a vertical sort of plan. Now, I applied that very basic premise to an actual 25-acre block that's a quarter area of a full Barcelona block, but you can see that it has a green street, it has a Broadway, it has a transit street, it has a Market Street, and then it has pedestrian streets and new corridors, and you're again able to go above vertical, and that verticality means that the base, the first 4 to 6 floors relate to the street, to the street, to the street. And we all know you got to get the street right, but we kind of leave everything else to chance with the design guidelines. Now the next layer should be the block level, where your relationships go to the block across the street from you, so that your party room fits with their party room, your work room fits with their work room, that we're able to have a harmony within our building types. And then finally, the top is more like agriculture land, where you have a few units set out in nature, set out in space, but you can generate electricity, you can have habitats, you can put all kinds of more industrialized sort of working uses of the upper floors beyond just a penthouse in a large the second, third home. The inspirations for that came from the one on the left is in China, where there's the transit runs on the 6th, 7th floor above the streetscape. So you have different layers of mobility. And then this other building on the right-hand side, these 3 buildings along this block here in Kansas City, where you can see the street layer and the first 4 stories have a different relationship in that middle layer. The second, the 4 to 6 stories have a different layer as to the top. And this is that beginning of these layers of placemaking. In Rotterdam, there's this new Highline idea, which is really just understanding that pedestrian tube that runs across the first floor does not work. It kills the street. But if you lift it up to the next level of walkability, the first 4 to 6 floors are walkable from the street. The next 4 to 6 floors are only walkable from the elevator or the access point. And that's what Rotterdam is beginning to study here. And then the next floors, 8 to 12 and beyond, are of a different mobility and different length. So this is a new project that's going on in Rotterdam. And then in downtown San Diego, you have Jonathan Siegel's new building in Little Italy on the left that has the different levels that have connections with each other, and a really well placement of a small tower that tells a shadow. And then you have Frank Walden's building that has sky streets, the idea of sky streets, and that they would connect to different buildings on different parts of the block. And then finally, UCSD, Softer Urbidus, and HKS did this wonderful live, learn center and UCSD that you can see. The first 4 floors are education. The next 4 to 6 floors that go up to 8 to 12 is actually unit living. And there's different types of spaces and different types of places and different types of connections in each one. But the beauty of this is it's not design guidelines. I can make objective design standards with streamlined permit processing through don't say it, form-based code, and am able to zone a plan for layers within the buildings at the horizontal level, front, middle, back, and the vertical level, street, block, and beyond. That's the way to do the action, though, is it's happening right now. There's some really great financially backed mixed-use mortgage ideas going on with the new Biden campaign, which is necessary. The problem that you have is our financing mechanisms don't allow for mixed use as well, which is why you see that little layer of retail on the ground floor and then one use throughout. We have to fix the financing. And oh, by the way, San Diego has a history of fixing the financing. And then you understand place types. And then you understand the market shifts, the innovation districts, the life science centers, the tech hubs, the remote working place, the being outdoors. That's idea number 1. That was the longest one because it's the most radical in my opinion. Number 2, I only have 2 more after Katie. I only got 4. And so the next one is an E Street. I call it a greenway that goes along with the C Street Transit Way, which is where the trolley is, the Broadway Busway, which is where all the buses are. And then we need this greenway. So what happens is we end up with this really nice Central City multimodal corridor. And this corridor is actually the spine of downtown that leads to these larger sub areas in East Village. We can make East Village have more than one area. We can have the gas lamp and the marina, and Little Italy, and Little Italy now seems to extend all the way over to Cortez Hill. But these different able to subdivide and plan smaller quadrants of downtown rather than one size fits all, with a series of parks, a series of bayfronts, and a series of corridor types. And the way that I would approach it first is with East Street. There's already existing greenway areas where the area from Horton Plaza is a plaza, then it goes to the Federal area, then it stops at the train, but then you have E Street, which is a really bad one-way street that's all very fast and silly. That it connect up with the Nolan Stepner Parkway down 12th, that hooks up with the Nolan Stepner Parkway down to the waterfront over here, and then goes up Harbor Drive again. So then you're able to have new crossings at the trains over the train tracks. You're able to connect these new entertainment and hub districts, and then you're able to create a series of plazas and placitas and small different types of plazas, small different types of greenways, and you have a series of places that actually activate each one of these sub districts. It only costs like it only costs like $50 million to put together. I didn't show you that we already have 25 million earmarked for it, but it creates these connections, these design principles of a thread of continuous thread, a continuous thread of design a series of places that are interesting, and then connections to everywhere else. And these mixed-use streets equal more commerce. The neighborhood centers come with the public parks, and then you can use the open streets to allow us to understand how to close down entire blocks of street now, how to close down half blocks of street. And then, of course, you use the vertical transect to the vertical coding tour to do your planning for how these buildings relate to these three different types of street types. Which leads to stop thinking about streets as traffic streets. Think about them as mixed-use streets, like we demand mixed-use buildings. We have all these mixed-use buildings. I'm gonna go to this one, but we put them on 35, 40 mile an hour one-way streets, and it's scandalous. It's scandalous, and we should be embarrassed that we demand the mixed-use building, and we put them on 1950s one-way streets. We do know we don't have alleys downtown, so we do service. We have these one-way streets, such as this here on E Street, which you see over here. We're adding bike lanes. It's making everybody nutty and crazy because there is no real thought that's either this or that. It's either this type of street or that type of street. They need to be mixed-use streets. I'm just going to show this again because this is scandalous. So the conventional streetscape, this is an actual place in San Diego. We should be embarrassed. Because we understand streets have different mobility zones, different speeds. The speed on the sidewalk is less than 8. The speed just off the sidewalk, where the stopping and the starting and the curb management and the bicycles is 0 to 15. And then you have the streets that come in the middle that give you the higher speeds. It better not be over 25 downtown, but they are. Then you have commercial uses. We understand we can manage this. We can add commerce. We've done it. We do it. We can also add live work. We can also build over and encroach into the streetscapes, especially in our very, very urban areas. They don't have to be suburban wide streets that have a median down the middle to keep cars off to the side, push closer to the buildings. We can push the buildings closer and closer into the street and have residential hotels. We can have living. And then also, of course, we like recreational uses, the greenways, the plazas. We've already started it. We've got the new parkway here on 14th Street that has no benches. The idea, though, of mixed-use streets mean we have to stop this first come, first serve street attitude. First come, first serve. I'm parking here. I'm driving here. This is me. I'm first. You have to understand that these need to be as managed as your mixed-use buildings that you're trying to get throughout our transit corridors. It's that attitude that first, of me come first, is what's killing us, but that's very American, which is why we are the flags upside down in front of my house today. Finally, because I'm not going to talk about the homeless need for safe camps, because safe camps and downtown partnership are 100% right, and we should be fighting for safe camps to help homeless people get off of the sidewalk and get them into a triage center and help them. And the downtown partnership is right in this. In a city, and the new vision needs to be done about a city instead of a city of villages, which is very old. That's been around. It's time for a new update. Call it a city of transit corridors, because we're planning everything around these transit priority areas. Everything. Parking, mix of uses, waiving of zoning, affordable housing. And oh, by the way, this is also where our business improvement districts, you can see a map on the left. The business improvement districts actually run along our corridors. And these business improvement districts are not coordinated. They actually got funding cut, just like the safe camps had their funding cut and then put in last week. Same business improvement districts had their funding cut, but business improvement districts are extremely valuable to try to help us plan locally, but also develop. The business improvement district are the people that know who's going to sell. They know the families that own the buildings. They know the tenants that are moving in. They know the marketplace. They know the lots that are available. We do that if we use zoning ordinance and community plans to master plan our city. We're going to be waiting again for another 50 years for 12,000 units a year to be able to build ourselves out of this housing deficit that we're in. So the Enhanced Business Improvement Program is not a new idea. Teddy Cruz came up with this and these images 15 years ago for Casa Familiar. But the idea is that the NGO, the Business Improvement District, is the liaison or curator between the government and financing and the community and the local people. So the NGO, this is the Casa Familiar, is a micro policy facilitator. They help to come up with design They help communicate with the public. They help come up with the standards and the ideas of what this community, this corridor is going to be. And then they help with financing. They help curate sellers and buyers and investors and micro lending, the models that you can build that are permitted and permitting and streamlining and all of those rules. They can help make this happen. They can also work with trade unions and job training in order, and the chamber to help facilitate San Diego's chamber labor battles. Because at the end of the day, if you're able to zone for 3, and we understand complete communities are everywhere, you can get 12 and beyond units today. That's great. But if you don't have the local people or don't understand that they're able to build this stuff, they're just going to wait for somebody from New York, London, or Tokyo to invest in it. When in fact, one of the greatest values in San Diego is land and development and construction. And we should be, in order to compete for jobs for local San Diegans with the world's tech center and the world's life science engineers from all over, we need to be able to help people understand how to build and how to construct and how to develop their own properties in their own neighborhood, their own land. And oh, by the way, there's groups that do this. The Incremental Development Alliance does it. And they work with unions and they work with the labor to help them understand how to get into the business of it. And the state is forcing this hand. The state actually, Peter Calthorpe, who we mentioned earlier, is leading this AB 2011 that's gotten through Assembly and in the Senate, going to the governor's desk, that says that all commercial corridors are going to allow mixed use. All commercial corridors are going to allow housing by right with streamlined permitting, especially if you use labor. And so everything that we're talking about is lined up at the state level and forcing it down because we're just not doing it at the local level. And so in order, you just have to put a program in the Economic Development Department. You have to begin starting somewhere. We have somewheres that are ready to go. And I think actually College area with the community plan update and the College at El Cajon Boulevard is a tremendous place to start because it's all happening right now and they have great leadership there, the great participation there. And nothing great is going to happen in this city until you get politics, design, and financing to line up together. I had to end on a quote to help Mike Steppner because that's what Mike Steppner likes. Thank you all very much.
That was a shotgun of so many different ideas. So we have a couple of comments in the chat, but I also want to open it up to everyone for questions and comments. And let's talk about some of the ideas that Howard presented. Someone's writing, thank you.
Thank you. So Howard, relative to your skyway, as in Minneapolis they call it, you had said that 1 story, 2 stories above doesn't work, and that's actually what Minneapolis has in their skyways.
Yeah.
They keep block to block, and that's maybe why their streets are dead. Of course, you have a different weather situation, and most of those are not open to the sky. So if you were to redesign Minneapolis, downtown Minneapolis over, you would do what you just talked about, raise them up to like the 6th floor. And go from there and let the streets relate better to the lower buildings.
Yeah, you know where I really learned this lesson was a few months ago in Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City not only had the plus 15, 1 layer above the street, which is a whole nother street infrastructure with just 1 or 2 layers of office or residential to support. It also had a below ground for tornado safety. They had 3 layers within the first 2 development or I should say intensity layers. There's no way that 2 floors of people can keep 3 sections of mobility full. So it just diffuses it. So that's why we have to think between. That's why Leon Creer, said, hey, walkability doesn't end at the front of the building. You walk up 4 to 6 floors because that's about the same as walking a quarter mile in effort and energy. So that first 4 to 6 floors need to be related to the street. That'll make our street life great. But then that next layer, the 6 to 4 to 12, because I do think wood frame, the timber frame construction is going to help us get to 12 with very easy construction. But that second level needs its own infrastructure, its own place types. Are you isolated in a building? And in San Diego, you can be outdoors, great. You don't want to be outdoors in Oklahoma, Minneapolis, and Calgary, where all that other crap is. It's killing their streets because it's tough. But here we can't use those same models for crappy towns because we're a great town.
Thank you, Howard.
Thank you.
Howard, this is David Kyle. I so much appreciate your enthusiasm. Why is this so hard for government to get behind?
I don't know who's on here, so I'm just gonna wing it. I actually presented the enhanced PBIDs to the economic development group at the city of San Diego, and the reason why it's so hard for them to get behind is, number one, they just don't have the capacity to change. As a matter of fact, they're struggling because they got their budgets cut. How in the world can you do anything, take any risks, try anything new, if you don't have the political will to do what you're doing today? And so I think it's a value system, and I think you see in our budgets the things that we value, which right now are police and potholes. And I think that that's something that the election yesterday should have helped us with, but I don't think it did. And we need to demand, we need to go out and say these are our values that we support. I also think status quo is, highly subsidized. Status quo. San Diego is very, very nice. There's not a lot of demand for change because it's nice here. You really need a lot of pain in order to say, I want to take the risk of something new. So status quo kind of protects you from that risk because we don't have a lot of pain. So I think we really kind of need to focus on one or two things that are causing us pain, which I didn't even present my homeless thing. Homelessness is causing us pain, as is the as is the housing crisis, as is the local job crisis, in my opinion. I don't think we're still, San Diego is still either service industry or military or the very high end, and that we're missing that middle income jobs that help that middle income housing that we're not building because there's not as much demand for it as we like to think there is. Thank you for the question. Looks like I wore everybody down.
So I have a question, and maybe it's not really answerable, but maybe something to think about for everyone, or to spur more questions. But how can the private sector, which I think most of us on this call represent, start integrating all of this thinking kind of across the board? I think it's particularly relevant to this group and what we're hoping to achieve as we start to look at and get involved in some different things that are going on within the city. But like, how can we just get everybody in the private sector on board to start pushing these directives and just integrating it into what we're doing outside of the government?
Thank you. Thank you. That's a good question. I actually think, this is something Mike Stepner and I've talked about for a long time. This idea, this RDAC is, did I say it right? RDAC. The idea of the RDAC is the idea of the big tent. And the Big Ten idea was to get everybody together to talk about this stuff, which is what you're saying. How do we get everybody together to talk about this stuff? Again, I think it's a cultural issue. If we were in Chicago, Chicago's expectation of new development is very high. New construction, new design, extremely high. They have a great culture of design, and we're missing that. Well, no, we're building that right now. We're building that, and I'll say my favorite place to see us building it is with the architects as developer crew, the MRED Woodbury graduates that Ted Smith and Jonathan Siegel developed, and they've stayed. And what they do so great is they share all their knowledge and all their information with each other, and even their comps, which allows them to develop on that edge where the New York, Tokyo, London money won't go, and allows them to go to that edge in Southeast San Diego, to go to that edge in Serra Mesa. And I think that is a real bonus for us, because architect, designer as developer, it raises the bar. And so I think RDAC and Friends of San Diego Architecture and the Architecture Foundation All these groups just keep beating on the idea that design matters, design matters, design matters. We can do better, we can do better, we can make a higher quality of life, we can get people around town, we can get people to jobs, we can get people, great places to be. It just takes time to change culture. It takes time to cultivate our own culture, and I think it's happening though. I do think we're doing it. So good question. We're part of the answer, I think.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Howard. I think this is just a great follow-up to what Vicky actually shared with her, the green infrastructure, and what she was sharing with the Green Infrastructure Consortium and all of the new environmental practices that we should be weaving in to all of these different projects. I mean, it was so striking in some of your first images to see how dense our city is. If you look at Boston or some of the East Coast cities that might appear to be more walkable because of all the interconnected green space, to some degree, we're doing a whole lot of reverse engineering of our urban environment to try and bring that in after the fact, which becomes difficult. And it's easier to put it in at first than to kind of put it in after the fact, right? So trying to create these interconnected green spaces where we can have green infrastructure that cleans the city and I love the idea of pulling this in on vertical stratifications, but also, using this as a mechanism to create more, community identity and to know that we're continuing to build the identities of these different communities through all these new implementations. So yeah, I think it was really impressive, the whole presentation. Just want to echo that this is great to continue to push high design and then also, green communities.
I was curious, kind of building on that, for the existing greenways that we do have in relationship to the proposed new greenways that you're suggesting. How do you see us improving upon what we have? Like, what ways are the existing greenways lacking? And what ways would you love to see advancing that idea and building on that?
Stop building capital improvement projects that are 20 years old. The median that went down University Avenue was absolute trash, and we should be angry about it because all it did was push the cars closer, higher speeds, less friction to the edges where the bikes and the people are. But that's also because we were doing trashy infrastructure 20 years ago. And so we got to update our capital improvement programming. We got to update our traffic and stormwater divisions to understand that you can't build trash.
Wait, so Howard,
How do you really feel?
Howard, you just said
I'm really angry about it because my kids, my family, they're not kids, they're teen, they're almost 20. My family and stuff, we go around there and it's dangerous. I can't even get them on a bike because it's dangerous. We've got to do better. Our streets are too wide, they're too fast, and we have the wrong mindset for all of our streets, which is why of my ideas, 2 of the 4 were all about streetscapes, and actually the 3rd was about streets as well, with the enhanced business improvement districts along corridors. We should be a city of transit corridors.
So Howard, you are not in favor of medians in wide streets then? You're saying that you're better off narrowing the street and putting that open space not in the middle but on the sides.
Yes, right? Exactly right. Where your rain gardens want a pool, you want that stuff, you want all that stuff to be coming off the buildings into that, coming off the awnings into that edge. We don't need to put that crap. And there's no stormwater in the middle of that street. It's rocks. It's rocks because we don't want to spend the money on landscaping.
Okay.
But I'm not angry.
You've seen what they've done downtown, right? They've put in all these new protected bike lanes. They at least have a curb, right? Between you and
it's not hard. Put that rubber curb in. I'm watching Pershing. I understand Pershing is a stormwater being retrofitted too. But the amount of over-engineering going into Pershing is killing me. When all you have to do is put those the K-rails up and you're done. You're done. You're protected. Let's go. It's ladder, faster, cheaper. We're broke. We're absolutely broke. And we should stop over-engineering and doing everything to the nth before we have it all connected the way that we need it to be.
Hey everybody, how do we bottle Howard? So we can take his show on the road and
Nobody wants to hear that. Only you all want to hear it because y'all are in the same. We're colleagues. We're brethren. You know, we all love this stuff, and everybody's got a presentation in them with their 5 ideas too.
But Howard, what are the biggest barriers you see to creating the kind of environment that you think that you just shared? What is keeping us from allowing that to happen?
Political
Government?
will, strong mayor.
Really? So if we had a mayor who believed in this more, you think we, like in Charleston, whatever that place was back there, remember they had Riley, that
Riley.
mayor.
And
Yeah.
that's a good. And Chicago had strong mayor with come on, Mike, help me.
Daily.
The Daily.
Daily.
Yeah, and we don't have a culture of strong mayors. As a matter of fact, we look back 1-2 mayors ago, it wasn't very good culture at all. So we don't have the culture of a strong mayor. We did the strong mayor very quickly. It was supposed to be a pilot project that just became. And I don't think that we're the 8th largest. You know, we're a big jurisdiction. I think that making city council people, the few that we have, just budget people, is a waste of our voting oomph and our collective push for political will. So I'm not blaming the mayor. The mayor's got who the mayor is who he is. It's the strong mayor system, I think, that's causing a bit of problem. And then we need to go at large with 15 or 20 council members and create voting blocks. And we need just more political will. It's all too bottled up in one narrow office with young people that aren't experienced trying to drive this ship. And they don't have the capacity to do a city of, our city, the 8th largest city in the United States, to help everybody. We can't even get our projects through development services at the proper time right now. We just log jam. And I think we need to open it up with political will to have more political people involved in the process to push people forward with their little levers that everybody's involved with.
Okay, so Howard, you brought up a topic that's been circulating in La Jolla for the last several months, which is we are so fed up with the city's inability to get anything done that we want to secede and become our own city so we can move faster and cheaper and better. So I would agree with you. Stuff is totally bollocksed up at City Hall. We've run everything into the ground, both fiscally and in terms of
yeah. I sit on the BIA committee. I thank you, Diane. I'm sorry to talk over you.
No, so the question I have is, number one, we're frustrated. We think we can be more nimble if we can break the city into smaller units with greater self-determination. I really like the City of Villages concept in that San Diego has a number of different neighborhoods that diversity should be, I think, celebrated and enhanced. However, the whole corridor thing that came in with complete communities is the way it's being implemented is spreading out development along very wide swaths inappropriately. It's encroaching on fairly intact neighborhoods, and we're not getting the kind of housing that we really need. I mean, frankly, I think the whole program's a friggin' disaster and would like to have that all rethought. So anyway, comments, maybe some questions in there. How do we get out of the cul-de-sac we're boxed into?
There's a lot in there. Sorry, Phil, hang on. As I say, there's a lot in there. Number one, you're not going to see me cry too much for La Jolla. Our firm did the only affordable housing in La Jolla that has 3 units. And so La Jolla can do a whole heck of a lot more than it's done regarding diversity. Also, you are a cul-de-sac because you got that mountain, you're hemmed in. There's not a whole lot you can do about that. And number 3, the point that I'm on the BIA's urban committee, and I like to give them all a hard time by saying, you voted for Prop B. You're the one that emptied out our city departments and our development services department because you thought it was taking too much money, too much time, too much this. So you emptied them out, and now you got what you asked for, Carl DeMaio, and it's not working because that's what that institutional knowledge is worth something. Having people that compete for jobs is worth something, and we don't have enough. We can't hire people, and we're 20-30% less in salary for people to work for the city. I'm not blaming the city staff. There's just not enough There's not enough oomph in there to do it. And then, but who has oomph? Places like La Jolla. And I would love if La Jolla were able to add to the tax, the tax rolls with more development, more stuff that can help the city. Because La Jolla can help the city because it's a place that everybody in the world wants to go to in great high demand. So, I mean, La Jolla is a double-edged sword for me in that regard. But I appreciate your comments, Dan.
Yeah,
Phil?
I just wanted to support your comments on the bid. To answer Diane's question from my perspective, and I've been a friend of what's his name in Little Italy,
Marco.
Marco. I've been a fan of Marco's forever since I came to San Diego, and the Business Improvement District is the vehicle in my mind that could help each neighborhood, that could help the transit, the transects, the transit corridors that Howard's talking about, and that sort of economic energy and frankly environmental energy. I mean, just the character of Little Italy with the hay bales on the corner and the goblins and the Christmas trees and all of that. I mean, that's built-in culture, and people want to be on the streets because it's all kind of laid out there on the surface of their arms, welcoming you in. And if you did that in University Heights, you did that in Uptown and North Park and in Mission Valley and every place else, you're going to begin to transition from a government-centric to a business improvement-centric environment.
I would completely agree with you. I've had some interesting conversations with Marco Lamondri and also Marco Sessa. And La Jolla is looking at what they've done in Little Italy as a potential model. But you have to have some sort of economic engine to be able to do that. So yeah, I agree, but I think basically you need an economic driver and you need the city to get out of the way, because at this point they're just stopping everything, so nothing can happen. So I would agree that the strong mayor system has been hampering us. It's
that's also why you're
not working
seeing
the way it was intended to or was sold to the citizens.
that's also the failure. The failure of that is why you're seeing the state involved so deeply, but not just San Diego, every city in California, because we've allowed ourselves to grind ourselves to a halt. And that was that Peter Navarro, hopefully he goes to jail. He's the one that started prevent Los Angelesization now. In the 80s, he's the one, he created a lot of problems for San Diego running for mayor. How many times he run for mayor? 3 times, whatever it was. We can't do that kind of demand better. But I'm not bitter.
No.
Howard, you had brought up the downtown partnership and safe camps. Is that concept now public knowledge? I haven't heard about that before.
No, it's actually a conflict. The mayor's offices didn't put in any money for safe camps. The downtown partnership has been championing safe camps, and the mayor's office is it doesn't quite get people off the street. But so the budget redo of 2 weeks ago put in a pilot project for safe camps, which was for the site on 20th, the city maintenance yard on 20th and B and the Balboa Park. That was already a pilot project for safe camps because we used it successfully when we had hepatitis B, and it was proven to work. And we proved it when we did the convention center during COVID. It's proven to work. Let's get people living their private lives on our public streets a place to start, because not everybody has the same problems. Not everybody's a paycheck off. Not everybody's a drug addict. Not everybody's a mental health refugee. We need help. And by doing what we're doing for 4 years, 5 years, obviously isn't working. So Downtown Partnership is championing it.
It's also encouraging to
let me
see.
ask DK, do you know anything about what's going on with that with the chamber? And is there any have I missed something on that?
No, I mean, well, first of all, thank you for all of this. It's always lovely to hear you do what you do. No, realistically, I'm not aware of any efforts within the chamber to pull in this direction. I sit on this board and I try to take everything that I pull from these meetings and run in my boss's office. But at the moment, I'm not aware of any active or actions that we're taking.
Cool, thank you. I'm glad you're here.
Always.
All right, let's let everybody go home. This is I can't yell at everybody, can I?
Never stopped you before.
And I think you can, Howard. I think the point that everybody's making in a reaction to your comments, it's not the city getting out of the way necessarily. It's the city being able to become more supportive by having the right direction, the right people in place, cooperating and collaborating with the Business Improvement District and the neighborhoods. And we don't see how these things, my favorite line, we don't see how these things are all connected and how by solving one problem, we really have to solve all the other pieces that are connected to it. We like to just find something and we're going to find the silver bullet that solves that problem without thinking about what that problem really is. And I think it just takes, as Howard said, it takes everybody really pushing in a lot of different directions, from a lot of different directions to make cultural changes.
But Mike, I always go back, and I'm sure you would too, go back to John F. Kennedy's statement in the early 60s, which is ask not what your country or government should do for you, but what you can do for, your country. And we've seen during COVID, all those pop-up outdoor eating locations, and the city pretty much kind of followed along and has followed through with zoning and ordinances to allow it. And then of course to follow through and make sure that they're safe, because that's what the city's all about. But I do want to comment to Diane about the BID and specifically the one in La Jolla, which I do know a little bit about. And, the city, the citizens in La Jolla in the downtown got the BID created. They collect over $500,000 of additional tax for it. The city on top of it in the economic development department gives them several hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's really their job to step up and take on a whole lot of functions. And I've yet to see them fully take those on. So to blatantly continue to blame the city for being in their way, I really think I think it's the other way around. I think they really need to step up and start performing. Everyone looks to Little Italy and Marco Lamandri. Of course, they've been there for many decades and they've done a great job, but they've also worked at it for a long time. So I think it's every neighborhood's responsibility or certainly opportunity to step up and try to make the best of their neighborhoods. Howard, we all love to hear a rant. I mean, it's why we all used to watch CNN and listen to Chris Cuomo, get angry about the news, because he would get angry for us. So I thank you for doing that. I mean, you are speaking to the choir. But I think it always ultimately falls all the way back to all of us to try to do something. So that's my 2 cents for today.
So, Renee here, since Howard, this is clearly a political item. So I've got two pieces. One is, as you're speaking, what I'm hearing is this needs a political action committee. So if to Leslie's point, there needs to be some form of ingathering from those, we talk about preaching to the choir. So how does the choir get organized up? Because after this meeting, we will all go back into our very busy lives. So that was one question. And the second piece was, and pardon me for not knowing, but is there a consortium of the bids? Do the bids as groups ever get together and plan amongst themselves, or is it each?
I can help out with that.
Great.
because I was trying to interface with all of the bids and the MAD citywide to give them that citywide tree planting program PowerPoint a few years ago, a little bit pre-COVID. And I discovered that, and they're managed out of economic development. They do not have a single group that meets, even by, quarterly or monthly. They don't do that. And I asked the staff at the time to would you think about creating that? Because there is a commonality of issues and work programs. They don't have it. And I think it would be a real benefit to the city, of course, and the MADs and bids to have a collective meeting. So that's something that, you folks or we collectively could ask the director in economic development.
Yeah, and to build on that, there's also Parks and Rec manages all of their funding and all of their bookkeeping, but then also their parking districts have their own district as well. So there's three different. There needs to be coordination. I completely agree with Leslie.
So how do the collective, before we leave here and walk away, how do we look to this issue of our parking districts, bids, MADs, the importance of them coming together so that these collective interests can be identified and discussed. Other than Leslie, who might be interested in pulling on that thread?
I guess I would, since I came up with it.
And I think that you have identified a project for the RDAC or RDAC Issues Committee, headed by Todd Slanger. That's the kind of thing they should be looking at. So Todd's got a committee. Katie announced the meeting on Monday. Start thinking about that.
How about Marco Lamondri as a speaker for a future meeting?
Would be interesting.
Yeah.
And
That's a great idea.
I'd be open to jumping on board with that effort, Renee. For those of you who don't know me, I spent a chunk of my career in New York City at a property-based business improvement district. And there are, I don't know how many bids there are now, but there were like 80 something at the time. And so we formed our own bid association because the very nature of a bid is, I won't say anti-government, but actually in some ways, yes, it was. They were formed in the 70s, at least in New York City, when the property owner said, hey, city, you're not doing it for us, so we're going to do it ourselves. So there is kind of like a rebellious spirit there. And so to say that the city should come together and bring the bids together, maybe, but I do think there could be sort of an organic effort led by the bids themselves, that they need to have the interest in coming together to exchange ideas too.
And Tijuana and Mexicali are starting to put together bids as well, which is pretty a good timing.
So let me just do this. I'll send an email around to get this started. Anybody interested other than the folks that have mentioned it, please just, raise your hand at the moment in the reactions block, and I'll add you to the initial email.
You got Dyke and Jack.
Yeah, very interested.
Don't forget the downtown partnership.
And Renee, I'd be more than happy to help out.
Oh, Leslie, you're call number one.
Okay.
This to me is not just, it's all great, but to me, it's not that difficult. It just takes political will. Howard has this all figured out and had such great ideas. All what Todd Gloria has to say is, I embrace this and move forward and give it direction when we're done, instead of chasing around. And it just is crazy to me that somebody in government can't see that such a logical, clear idea. Of course, it can be refined, but why not, embrace it, move forward, and good things will come of it. It just is just common sense.
I couldn't agree more. Who's gonna call up Todd and move that needle?
Well, the AIA, ASLA, we can all group together, and push
the big
that.
tent.
But we shouldn't have to. But we can, and we can certainly open to do that. But gosh, it just shouldn't be that hard. It's the political will, as Howard said. And I don't know why forever. There's just no planning in the city. There's nobody leading the charge. It's just so frustrating.
Howard,
Thank you all for-
would you mind sharing that presentation with the group?
Yeah. I don't know how big it is. And
It would just,
yes, Todd, I'll send it to you.
Okay, there's so much great information there. I don't want to lose track of all of the inspiring, visionary, and kind of utopian ideals that I think.
Hey, if you don't aspire towards utopia, you won't even get a nice bathroom in Balboa Park.
Hey, you're talking to the toilet man. We can post it up on the RDAC site, I'm sure.
I'll send it. Thank you all for listening. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Howard.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much,
Howard.
Howard.
Thanks, Howard.
Miss you,
Thank
Howard.
you, Howard. So
Howard.
great presentation.
All right, everyone. We'll see you in September or before
Thanks,
then at the
Katie.
subcommittee meetings.